The desert moon of Keth-4 had no beauty left in it, and Marcus Vance liked it that way. A world of rust and silence suited a man who wanted to be forgotten by the galaxy that had thrown him away like garbage. He walked across the orange sand with his scanner held out in front of him, searching for anything worth selling. Old ship parts, broken power cells, maybe a navigation computer if he was lucky. The alien traders who visited this forgotten place would buy almost anything. If the price was right, Marcus was 34 years old, with rough hands and tired eyes that had seen too many disappointments. 5 years ago, he had been an engineer on Earth, a man with dreams of building ships that would carry humanity to the stars. Now he fixed broken engines for creatures who looked at humans the way humans looked at insects. The Galactic Concord had given humanity what they called observer status, which was a polite way of saying that humans were allowed to exist but not allowed to matter. They could watch the older species build their empires and trade their wonders, but they could not touch the real technology. They could not learn the real secrets. They were children allowed to sit at the adults' table only if they stayed quiet. Marcus had stopped being quiet a long time ago, and that was why he lived here now instead of on Earth. A false smuggling charge, a trial that lasted less than an hour, and suddenly he was nobody. Just another human scraping by on the edges of civilized space. His scanner beeped twice, and he stopped walking to look at the screen. There was something big buried in the canyon ahead, something made of metal and still holding an energy signature after what looked like centuries of neglect. This was unusual because most wrecks on Keth-4 were completely dead. He climbed down the rocky slope carefully, his boots slipping on loose stones as he descended into the shadows below. The canyon walls blocked out the harsh sunlight, and the temperature dropped quickly. At the bottom, he found himself standing in front of something that made his heart beat faster. It was a ship, half buried in sand and rock, but still recognizable. The hull was old and corroded, but the basic shape was intact. Marcus had seen many ships in his life, but this one was different. The design was elegant in a way that modern Concord vessels were not. With curves and angles that seemed to flow into each other like water, he walked closer and brushed sand away from a section of the hull, revealing a symbol that made him freeze in place. It was the seal of the Veth-Kai Dominion, a species that had vanished from the galaxy hundreds of years ago. Nobody knew what had happened to them. One day, they were one of the most advanced civilizations in known space, and the next day, they were gone. Their worlds were empty, their ships were missing, and the Concord refused to answer questions about them. Marcus should have walked away right then. A smart man would have reported the find to the Concord authorities and collected whatever small reward they offered. But Marcus had never been smart in that particular way. He had always been curious, and curiosity had already ruined his life once. What more could it take from him? He found an airlock on the side of the ship and used his cutting tool to break the seal. The door opened with a groan of ancient metal, and stale air rushed out past his face. It smelled like dust and time, and something else he could not identify. Inside the ship was dark, but his flashlight revealed corridors that were still intact. The walls were covered in symbols he did not recognize, carved into the metal itself rather than painted on. Everything was silent except for the sound of his own breathing and his footsteps echoing off the walls. He made his way deeper into the vessel, past empty crew quarters and a bridge covered in dust, until he found the cargo hold. The door was sealed with a different kind of lock, one that required a code he did not have. But Marcus was a mechanic, and locks were just puzzles waiting to be solved. It took him 20 minutes to bypass the security system. And when the door finally slid open, he stood there staring at what was inside for a long time without moving. The cargo hold was full of cryogenic pods, arranged in neat rows, each one sealed and still functioning on backup power after all these centuries. But the pods did not contain bodies. They contained technology. Weapons and tools and devices he had never seen before, all of them preserved perfectly in frozen suspension, and on every single pod there was a seal that made his blood run cold. The words were written in Galactic Common, the language all species used for official business. And they said, Class Omega, forbiddens to primitive species including humans. Marcus knew what Class Omega meant. It was the highest level of restriction the Concord could place on anything. Possession of Class Omega technology by a restricted species was punishable by death. There were no trials, no appeals, no exceptions. If the Concord found him here, they would execute him on the spot. He should have turned around and left. He should have sealed the ship back up and pretended he had never found it. But something kept him standing there, staring at the pods and thinking about what they represented. The ship had not been abandoned. It had been hidden. Someone had brought it here and buried it on purpose, on a moon so worthless that nobody would ever think to look. The HFY technology was supposed to be gone, destroyed along with the species that had created it. But here it was, waiting in the dark for someone to find it. Marcus reached out and touched one of the pods with his fingertips, feeling the cold metal and the faint vibration of the stasis field. He was holding history in his hands, holding secrets that the most powerful beings in the galaxy wanted to stay buried forever. His comm unit crackled suddenly with static, and then a voice spoke in cold official tones that made his stomach drop. This is Concord Enforcement Vessel Absolute Justice. We have detected an unauthorized biosignature inside a restricted location. Remain where you are and prepare to be detained. Marcus looked at the pods full of forbidden technology, then looked at the door behind him. He had maybe 5 minutes before the Concord kill team reached him. 5 minutes to decide if he was going to die in this tomb or find a way to escape. He grabbed the smallest items he could carry, a data core and a strange sphere that hummed with energy when he touched it, and then he ran. Marcus ran through the ancient corridors of the HFY ship with his heart pounding in his chest and the stolen technology clutched against his body. He could hear the Concord shuttle landing somewhere above him. Could imagine the soldiers already climbing down into the canyon with their weapons ready. Reached the engineering section and found what he was looking for. The ship still had fuel in its emergency tanks, not enough to fly but enough to create a very convincing explosion. He set the reactor to overload on a 5-minute delay and then crawled through a maintenance shaft that led to the surface. The Concord soldiers were already entering the ship when the reactor blew. The explosion was not large enough to destroy the vessel completely, but it collapsed the entrance and filled the corridors with fire and smoke. Anyone watching would think the whole thing had come apart from age and neglect. Marcus lay flat behind a rock formation and watched the soldiers retreat to their shuttle. They scanned the wreckage for life signs and found nothing because he was too far away. After an hour of searching, they gave up and flew away. Probably reporting that the human intruder had died in the collapse, he waited until night fell before he moved, walking the long miles back to his workshop with the data core and the sphere hidden under his coat. His hands were shaking, and his mind was racing with questions that had no answers. His workshop was a small building made of scrap metal, filled with tools and parts and the smell of engine grease. It was ugly and cramped, but it was his, the only thing in the galaxy that belonged to him. He locked the door behind him and sat down at his workbench to examine what he had. Stolen the data core was a cylinder about the size of his forearm, covered in the same strange symbols he had seen on the ship's walls. It took him 3 hours to figure out how to connect it to his computer, and another 2 hours to realize that the information inside was encrypted in a language that no longer existed. But Marcus was patient, and he was clever in the particular way that mechanics are clever. He understood patterns and systems, how things fit together and why they worked. He found translation databases on the black market, networks, and started piecing the language together. One symbol at a time, what he discovered made him sit back in his chair. and stare at the screen for a very long time. The Vethkai had not been destroyed. They had ascended. They had developed technology so advanced that they could reshape matter itself, could rebuild atoms and molecules according to their will. They had become something more than physical beings, something that existed beyond the normal rules of the universe, and the Galactic Concord had erased them for it. Files contained records of a secret war, a campaign of extermination carried out by the founding species of the Concord against the Vethkai. They had been afraid, these ancient and powerful beings, afraid of what would happen when a younger species surpassed them. So they had murdered an entire civilization and buried every trace of their technology. Where it would never be found, the sphere Marcus had stolen was called a seed. And according to the files, it was the most dangerous device the Vethkai had ever created. It could reconstruct any form of matter, could build anything from raw materials, could repair or destroy or transform whatever its user desired. In the hands of someone who understood it, the seed was nothing less than a tool of creation itself. Marcus picked up the sphere and held it in his palm, feeling it hum against his skin like a living thing. It was warm and smooth, and it seemed to pulse with light when he focused his attention on it. The file said it responded to intent, to the conscious will of its user, rather than programmed commands. He thought about what he could do with this power. He could sell it to the highest bidder and live like a king for the rest of his life. He could hand it over to the Concord and hope they would spare him in exchange. Or he could keep it and learn to use it and become something more than a forgotten mechanic on a worthless moon. The choice should have been easy. Survival was supposed to come first. But Marcus kept thinking about Earth, about the billions of humans who would never know that they were being held back on purpose, who would spend their whole lives believing that they simply were not good enough to stand beside the older species. He remembered his father, a man who had worked in a factory his whole life building components for ships that humans were not allowed to fly. He remembered his mother, who had taught school and told her students that someday humanity would earn its place among the stars if they just worked hard enough. He remembered himself as a young man, full of hope and ambition. Before the Concord had taught him that hope was a luxury reserved for those who already had power, something changed inside him in that moment. Something that had been sleeping for 5 years woke up and refused to go back to sleep. He was angry now, truly angry, in a way he had not allowed himself to be since his exile. The Concord had taken everything from him. His career, his home, his future. They had done the same thing to his entire species, had kept humanity small and weak and dependent for their own convenience. And now he had the proof, had the weapon, had everything he needed to fight back, but he could not do it alone. He needed allies, people who understood what he was up against and had reasons of their own to hate the Concord. He needed to hide from the authorities, who would surely come looking for him once they realized he had escaped. There was a network of smugglers who operated beneath the surface of HFY, people who lived outside the law because the law had never offered them anything worth following. Marcus had done business with them before, trading salvage for supplies and asking no questions about where things came from. He gathered his tools and his stolen technology and prepared to disappear into the underground. But before he left his workshop, he stopped and looked back at the place that had been his home for 5 years. He was about to become a criminal, a real one this time, wanted by the most powerful organization in the galaxy for possessing secrets that could change everything. There would be no going back from this, no way to return to the quiet life of a forgotten mechanic. But then again, that life had never really been living. It had just been waiting to die slowly. And Marcus Vance was done waiting. He stepped out into the night and walked toward the hidden entrance to the smuggler warrens, carrying the weight of forbidden knowledge and the hope of something better. The smuggler warrens were carved into the rock beneath the surface of HFY. a maze of tunnels and chambers where people went when they wanted to disappear. The air was stale and the lighting was dim, but Marcus felt safer here than he had felt anywhere in years. He found a corner to set up his equipment and began reaching out to contacts he had made over 5 years of living on the edge. Most of them wanted nothing to do with his problems, backing away as soon as they heard the words Concord and Omega class. But a few listened, and a few decided to stay. Rix was a Torvani, a species that looked like tall insects with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw everything at once. His people had been classified as mid-tier by the Concord, which meant they were allowed more freedom than humans, but still forbidden from the truly advanced technologies. Rix had been a researcher once, working on energy systems that could have revolutionized his world, until the Concord shut down his laboratory and destroyed 20 years of his work. He found Marcus on the 3rd day, drawn by rumors of a human who had stolen something from a Vethkai wreck. When Marcus showed him the data core and explained what it contained, the Tovani's compound eyes flickered with something that might have been rage or might have been joy. I knew they were lying to us, Rick said in his clicking voice. I knew there was more to the restrictions than safety and stability. They fear us, all of us, because they know what we could become. The second ally came looking for Marcus a week later. Her name was Jenna Cole, and she was human, a woman about his age with short dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had worked as a translator for the Concord, one of the few humans allowed to participate in galactic affairs, until she stumbled across classified files that revealed the truth about humanity's status. Observer status was never meant to be temporary, Jenna told him. I found planning documents from 300 years ago that describe humanity as a species to be contained indefinitely. They never intended to let us advance. They were just waiting to see if we would be useful enough to keep around or dangerous enough to eliminate. Marcus shared his files with her and watched her face go pale as she read about the Vethkai and what had been done to them. She had suspected the Concord was corrupt, but she had not imagined anything this terrible. There was a third ally as well, though ally was perhaps too strong a word. The broker was an information dealer who appeared as a holographic projection because nobody knew what species it actually was. It spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once, and it asked no questions about morality or justice. You have something valuable, the broker said when Marcus explained his situation. Valuable enough that powerful beings will kill to obtain it or destroy it. I can help you hide. I can help you move. I can help you find buyers if that is what you want. What I want in return is a percentage of whatever profit you make and a front row seat to watch what happens. Next, Marcus agreed because he had no other choice. The broker had connections everywhere, and without those connections he would be caught within days. The 4 of them worked together in a hidden chamber deep beneath the surface, studying the seed and trying to understand its capabilities. Rix provided scientific knowledge, analyzing the energy patterns and molecular structures. Jenna translated the Vethkai texts, uncovering instructions and warnings written by beings who had died centuries ago. The broker provided resources, equipment, and information about Concord movements, and Marcus, the mechanic who had been thrown away by the galaxy, did what mechanics do best. He figured out how to make it work. The seed responded to intent, to the conscious will of its user. But it was not simply a matter of wishing for something and having it appear. You had to understand what you wanted at a deep level, had to visualize the structure and function of what you were trying to create. It was less like magic and more like a tool that amplified your own knowledge and ability. Marcus spent hours holding the sphere and focusing his mind, starting with simple things. He transformed a piece of scrap metal into a perfect sphere, then into a cube, then into a complex gear with teeth so precise they could have been measured in atoms. He repaired a broken power cell by imagining the chemical structure it was supposed to have. He built a circuit board from raw materials. Watching the components assemble themselves according to his will, the others watched him with awe and something like fear. No human was supposed to be able to do this. No primitive species should have been capable of interfacing with technology this advanced. But Marcus was not special in the way the Concorde defined special. He was simply a man who understood how things fit together, who had spent his life learning to see the patterns hidden inside machines. After 3 weeks of practice, he felt ready to attempt something larger. He took the seed and his tools to the old salvage shuttle that had carried him across Keth 4 for years. It was an ugly little vessel, slow and unreliable, barely capable of atmospheric flight, let alone interstellar travel. He placed his hands on the hull and closed his eyes and imagined what he wanted. Not a warship, not a weapon, but something better. A ship that could not be seen, could not be tracked, could not be caught. A ghost moving through the dark between stars. The seed hummed in his pocket, and the shuttle began to change. The hull rippled like water as new materials wove themselves into existence. The engine reconfigured itself into something quieter and faster. Sensors and shields and stealth systems grew from nothing. Guided by Marcus's will and knowledge, when he opened his eyes an hour later, the shuttle was gone. In its place was something sleek and dark and beautiful, a vessel that seemed to swallow light instead of reflecting it. Rick scanned it and found nothing. No energy signature, no heat, no mass reading. As far as any sensor could tell, the ship did not exist. They underestimated us, Marcus said quietly. They thought we were too primitive to handle their secrets. But humans have been taking things apart and putting them back together since we learned to use fire. We adapt, we improvise, we figure things out. That is what makes us dangerous. A warning came from the broker that same night. A Concorde Inquisitor named Overseer Thiessen had arrived on Keth 4. She was hunting for the human who had breached the Vethkai tomb. And she had brought a kill team of elite soldiers with her. Marcus looked at his allies, at the ghost ship waiting in the shadows, at the seed glowing softly in his hand. "And I suppose it is time for us to disappear," he said. "But not before we give Thiessen something to think about." Overseer Thiessen was not like the common soldiers Marcus had escaped before. She was a Valeth, one of the founding species of the Concorde, a being that looked like a statue carved from living crystal, with eyes that burned like cold fire. Her people had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, and they did not tolerate defiance from lesser creatures. She found the entrance to the smuggler warrens on her 3rd day of searching. Her soldiers burning through the hidden doors with weapons that could melt stone. The people who lived in the tunnels scattered like insects fleeing a flood, but Thiessen was not interested in them. She wanted only the human who had stolen Vethkai technology. Marcus and his allies were already gone, their ghost ship slipping away into the night while the Inquisitor was still breaking down doors. But escaping Keth 4 was only the beginning of their problems. Thiessen had access to Concorde resources that spanned the entire galaxy. Ships and soldiers and surveillance systems that watched every jump point and trading station. They ran for 3 weeks, hiding in asteroid belts and dead systems, never staying in one place longer than a few hours. Rix piloted the ghost ship while Jenna continued to work on the Vethkai files, translating document after document in search of anything that might help them survive. What she found changed everything. The files contained a complete history of the Galactic Concorde. Not the official version taught in schools and broadcasts, but the real story, hidden behind centuries of lies. The founding species had not united to bring peace and prosperity to the galaxy. They had formed an alliance of fear, an agreement to prevent any younger species from ever surpassing them. The Vethkai were not the only victims. There had been others before them, civilizations that had reached the edge of transcendence only to be wiped out and forgotten. The Concorde had been doing this for thousands of years. pruning the garden of intelligent life to ensure that no new flowers ever grew taller than the gardeners. And humanity was on the list. There were documents discussing the human problem, cold analyses of human potential and human danger. The authors noted with alarm that humans advanced faster than any species in recorded history, jumping from primitive tools to space travel in a mere 10,000 years. They recommended indefinite containment at best and extermination at worst. Observer status was just a polite name for a cage. Marcus read these files in the dim light of the ghost ship's cabin and felt something cold settle into his chest. It was not surprise, not exactly. He had suspected something like this for years. But seeing it written down in official language, knowing that his entire species had been condemned before they were even born, turned suspicion into certainty. We need to tell people, Jenna said. If the galaxy knew the truth about the Concord, if they understood what was really happening, they would not believe us, Rix interrupted. We are criminals and fugitives. Anything we say will be dismissed as propaganda. Marcus looked at the seed in his hand, feeling its warmth against his palm. The Vethkai had hidden their technology rather than destroying it, had buried caches across the galaxy in places the Concord would never think to look. They had been waiting for someone to find them, someone willing to fight back. We do not need everyone to believe us, he said slowly. We just need the ones who are already suspicious, the species that have been held back, the people who have wondered why their progress always seems to stall at the same point. We give them the evidence and let them draw their own conclusions. The broker arranged for the broadcast, routing it through 100 different relay stations so it could not be traced or stopped. Marcus recorded a message explaining what he had found, keeping his voice calm and steady as he described the massacre of the Vethkai and the plans for humanity. He included files and documents, proof that could be verified by anyone willing to look. The message went out on every open channel in the sector, spreading faster than the Concord could suppress it. Most species ignored it or dismissed it as human lies. But some listened, the ones who had their own reasons to doubt the Concord's benevolence. The Torvani shared it among their scientific communities. The Brel passed it through their trade networks. A dozen smaller species began asking questions that their governments did not want to answer. Worthison caught up to them above the neutral station of Axis Prime, appearing out of nowhere with 3 Concord warships that surrounded the ghost ship before Marcus could react. The stealth systems had hidden them from sensors, but someone had betrayed their location. Probably one of the broker's contacts looking to earn a reward surrender. The Omega technology and the human called Marcus Vance. Thassan's voice came through the CUM system, and I will allow your companions to live. Resist and you will all die here. Marcus looked at his friends. At Rix, who had risked everything to help a human. At Jenna, who had given up her comfortable life for the truth. At the broker's hologram flickering nervously in the corner. They had come so far and fought so hard, and now it seemed like it was all ending in this cold patch of space. I have an idea, Marcus said quietly. But it is dangerous. It might kill Meadowood, Jenna said without hesitation. We did not come this far to surrender. Marcus picked up the seed and pressed it against the ship's control panel, closing his eyes and reaching out with his mind in a way he had never attempted before. He did not just want to reshape the ship this time. He wanted to become part of it, to merge his consciousness with the machine, so he could react and adapt faster than any normal pilot. The seed responded with a surge of power that felt like fire rushing through his veins. Suddenly, he could feel the ship around him like it was his own body, could sense the Concord vessels and their weapons and their movements as clearly as he could see his own hands. The boundaries between Marcus and machine blurred until he was not sure where one ended and the other. Began the kill team boarded through the airlock. Soldiers in powered armor, carrying weapons that could punch through walls. But Marcus was already moving, the ship dancing through space with impossible grace. systems activating and deactivating in patterns no computer could predict. He sealed corridors and opened airlocks, turned the ship itself into a weapon against the intruders. It was beautiful and terrifying, and it was tearing him apart. Human minds were not designed to process this much information, to control this many systems, to think at the speed of light. He could feel himself fragmenting. Pieces of his consciousness, scattering into the Machinia hand, grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back. It was Rick's, his compound eyes filled with concern. "You are still human," the Tavani said. "That is your strength. Do not lose it, Marcus." Let go of the connection with a gasp, collapsing to the floor as the seed rolled from his fingers. The ghost ship tumbled out of control for a moment before Jenna grabbed the helm. Behind them, the Concorde warships were in chaos. Their soldiers defeated and their systems scrambled by attacks they could not understand. They escaped through a jump point that materialized out of nowhere. A path opened by the seed's last surge of power, and left Thiessen screening oars at her damaged fleet, but the Inquisitor's report had already reached the Concorde High Council. A human had used Omega technology and survived. Worse, he had inspired others to question Concorde authority. The old ones debated for less than an hour before reaching their decision to activate the Silence Protocol. The eldest of them commanded, "It is time to deal with the human problem permanently." The Silence Protocol was the Concorde's final solution for species that became too dangerous to control. A fleet of 100 warships would jump to Earth and its colonies simultaneously, destroying every human settlement before they could organize a defense. It had been used twice before in the history of the galaxy, and both times the targeted species had been erased so completely that no one even remembered their names. Marcus learned about the protocol from intercepted communications, and the knowledge hit him like a physical blow. He had wanted to fight back against the Concorde, to expose their lies and give humanity a chance to rise. Instead, he had triggered the extinction of his own people. "You did not cause this," Jenna said when she saw the look on his face. "They were always going to do this eventually. You just forced them to move faster. That does not help the billions who are going to die." Marcus replied and stopped them. Rick said simply, "You have the power. Use it." Marcus looked at the seed in his hand, still glowing with the strange light of Vethkai technology. He had used it to reshape metal and escape enemies and even merge with a machine. But he was just one man, and the Concorde had an armada. He could not stop 100 warships by himself. But maybe he did not have to. The Vethkai files had mentioned other caches, other seeds and devices hidden across the galaxy in case someone worthy ever found them. They had known they were going to lose their war against the Concorde, so they had prepared for a future they would never see. They had planted seeds of their own, scattered them like stars, and waited for someone to make them grow. If Marcus could not fight the Concorde alone, he would not fight alone. He would share what he had learned, give the power to everyone who had been held back, and let the galaxy fight together. It took 3 days to prepare the transmission, the most important message humanity would ever send. Marcus included everything: the seed designs and the molecular printers and the energy systems and the building blocks of technologies that the Concorde had kept locked away for thousands of years. He translated the instructions into every language he could find and packaged them so that anyone with basic technical knowledge could understand them. "This is not a weapon," he recorded in his message. "It is a gift. The beings who ruled this galaxy wanted to keep us all small and weak and dependent on their mercy. They murdered entire civilizations to protect their power. But power is not meant to be hoarded. It is meant to be shared. This is everything the Concorde did not want you to have. Use it wisely." The broker protested that they were giving away the most valuable technology in history, that they could have used it to become wealthy beyond imagination. Marcus ignored it. Rix helped refine the technical specifications. Jenna made sure the message was clear and convincing. They broadcast it to every human colony, every allied species, every world that had listened to the earlier message about the Vethkai. The signal spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could stop it, carried by relay stations and copied by receivers and shared by beings who were hungry for change. And then Marcus did one more thing. He set a course back to Kef 4, back to the canyon where the Gozanti cruiser still lay buried beneath rock and sand. The Concorde would expect him to run, to hide, to try to save himself. They would not expect him to return to the beginning. Thesson was waiting when he arrived, her warships surrounding the canyon like predators around wounded prey. She had been stripped of some authority after her failure at Axis Prime, but she had convinced the Council to give her one more chance. Capturing or killing Marcus would restore her honor. You have nowhere left to run, she transmitted as the ghost ship descended toward the surface. Surrender now, and I promise your death will be quick. Marcus did not respond. He walked out of his ship alone, carrying only the seed, and made his way down into the canyon where the ancient Vethkai vessel still waited. Theson's soldiers followed at a distance, weapons trained on his back. Waiting for the order to fire inside the wreck, Marcus found the cargo hold where it had all begun. The cryogenic pods had been destroyed in the false explosion he had triggered weeks ago, but the walls remained, covered in symbols that he could now read as clearly as his own language. That the Vethkai had known someone would come here eventually. They had designed this ship not just as a storage facility, but as a beacon, a signal transmitter that would activate when the right conditions were met. All it needed was a seed to power it and a mind willing to give the command. Thesson entered the cargo hold with a dozen soldiers at her back, her crystal body gleaming in the dim light. She looked at Marcus with eyes full of cold fury. It is over, she said. Your broadcast means nothing. The silence protocol will proceed. Earth will burn, and then we will hunt down every human who escaped. Your species ends today. Marcus smiled, and it was not the smile of a defeated man. You still do not understand, he said quietly. You never understood. You looked at humanity and saw primitives, saw children playing with toys they did not deserve. You never stopped to ask what we might become if you stopped holding us back. He pressed the seed against the wall of the ship and felt it connect to systems that had been sleeping for centuries. The beacon activated with a pulse of energy that spread outward in all directions, reaching across space to places the Concorde had never found all over the galaxy. Hidden caches began to wake up. On forgotten moons and in asteroid belts and deep beneath the surfaces of worlds, the Concorde considered worthless. Vethkai technology stirred to life. The seeds and the devices and the knowledge started transmitting, adding their power to the signal Marcus had already sent, including on Earth itself, where a cache buried beneath an ocean had been waiting for 300 years. The Sin soldiers opened fire, but the shots passed through Marcus without harming him. The seed was protecting him, wrapping him in a field of energy that made him almost untouchable. He was not fighting back, was not trying to escape. He was just standing there, smiling. While the beacon did its work, the Concorde fleet heading for Earth received panicked reports from 100 worlds. The suppressed species were rising, building things that should have been impossible, organizing in ways that the old powers could not control. The silence protocol could destroy humanity, but it could not destroy an idea. And the idea was already spreading faster than fire. The warships hesitated. Destroying Earth would not stop what had begun. It would only prove that Marcus had been telling the truth. Stand down. A message came from the Concorde Council. All units stand down. We are initiating diplomatic protocols. Marcus fell to his knees as the seed's power faded, exhausted beyond anything he had ever felt. Thesson stood over him with her weapon raised, trembling with the desire to finish what she had started. Go ahead, Marcus said. It does not matter anymore. You cannot unring a bell. You cannot put the fire back in the match. Humanity is awake now, and so is everyone else you tried to keep asleep. Thesson lowered her weapon. There was no point in killing him now. The damage was done 6 months later. Marcus sat in his old workshop on Keth 4, repairing an engine that belonged to a Tovani trader. The galaxy had changed around him, but he had not changed much himself. He was still a mechanic, still a man who understood how things fit together. Thesson found him there, no longer an inquisitor, stripped of her rank and exiled for her failure. She had come looking for answers, though Marcus was not sure what questions she wanted to ask. "Why did you do it?" she finally said. "Why did you risk everything?" Marcus looked up from his work and wiped the grease from his hands. "You told us we were not ready," he said. "That we were primitive. But that is the thing about humans. We do not wait until we are ready. We just start." He turned back to his engine, and Thesson stood there for a long moment before walking away into the endless desert, leaving humanity's future to unfold without her.